Nof Clibber, hi friends! Darth Momo here for an in-depth, spoiler-filled discussion on Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I'm gonna be flat out. This movie kind of sucked. If you watched my first thoughts video, you would know that I was not too into this movie, and that after I first saw it, and now that I've had 2 viewings and a couple of days to think about it, I've only solidified more of a negative opinion of this film. I may have enjoyed it a bit more on my second viewing, but the issues that I have, the issues I had with it still remain. I wasn't too excited from the get-go, to be honest. The previous 3 films I saw in theaters had a similar pattern for me. Excitement for the film, but no over-the-top hype until the week of. Then I would be thinking about it non-stop. Then the day of, I would be mellow until I got into the theater, and then it would hit me. This time, it did not. I had no real enthusiasm about the entire day. It was obvious the hype for general audience as well had fizzled a little bit. Only a few people cheered during the beginning of the crawl, and it took a couple moments to get the cheer going. The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi had nowhere near as depressing as that with the audience cheer. But enough about outside aspects. Let's delve into the film itself. This film has several issues, not only enough to make it redeemable in my opinion, or unredeemable in my opinion. The overall summary of the film is Palpatine's return from the dead, and the 18 go on a journey to find where he is hidden at. Meanwhile, Kylo Ren chases Rey in the Resistance, and in the process Kylo Ren is redeemed as Leia dies. They all end up on a planet called Exegol, where Palpatine is at. The Resistance battles a fleet of Star Destroyers with Death Star cannons on them. Rey and Ben take on Palpatine. Rey dies in the process, but Kylo Ren resurrects her and dies in the process. The Resistance wins, and there's a galaxy-wide celebration. Rey heads to the Lars homestead, and the film ends. The plot was meh, but let's delve into the characters, which is what I have the most gripes with. First one, Palpatine. His existence in the movie is not really explained and is kind of pointless. Yes, they confirm early on that in fact he did die in Return of the Jedi, which by the way, I think the only good thing about Palpatine is that they brought him in early on instead of making it some big plot twist later on. So he's back, but they don't really explain how, or why he is still around, or why he waited so long for his creation of what he dubs the Final Order. I also think him having a son was kind of a stab in his character. He is a straight-up villain, and he is nothing but evil. He enjoys being evil. To say that he was capable of loving someone other than himself and the dark side, I think is bizarre and blatant character assassination. And why was this son never one of his apprentices, or an inquisitor at the least, in some sort? Why is this son never mentioned from 1983 in any sort of material till now? Why did he even have a son? Why was he never involved? So many questions this film just glazes over. Then it is revealed that he made Snoke, and you see actual tanks of Snokes being made. It is never explained what the heck it all is. They also mentioned something about a diet in the Force, and they never, he mentions that, but he doesn't really explain. And then once again, he just dies, and that's it. Except in Jedi, when he died, it was final. Now what is to stop him from coming back? I also meant to mention the idea of him having an entire fleet of Star Destroyers with Death Star weapons is so uncreative. It just takes you out of the film. We have had 3 Death Stars. No one wanted a second, no one wanted Starkiller Base, and everyone begged for no more super weapons. This is now, we have 9 episodic films, and only 2 of them don't involve some sort of super weapon. Then we get a whole fleet of them. Next character is Rey. Making her a Palpatine may explain why she is crazy powerful, but it ruins the character arc she went through in the last 2 movies. As much as I wished her parents were not nobodies, it is a seamless arc that the first 2 movies set up, and I think was an effective arc for her to realize you don't have to be someone of lineage to have a place in the galaxy. She went the whole 2 movies trying to figure out who she is, and trying to say, oh, this is why I'm important. But it was an effective story, I think, for her to ultimately realize, and it was her arc to realize, hey, I don't have a lineage, but I can still find a place in this galaxy. I wanted her to be a Skywalker because Star Wars was the story of Skywalkers, and also to explain her powers in the Force. But making her a Palpatine was a jarring retcon that came out of nowhere, and I think ruined 2 characters at once. The Last Jedi established her parents as no one, and she was of no lineage, but then suddenly she is a Palpatine, and this reveal has little build-up and ultimately fell flat. I genuinely held my hands up in a disgusting shock when this was revealed. Next character is Kylo Ren. First off, I think him wearing the mask again is a step back for his character. Force Awakens set him up to be a Vader fanboy, and part of his arc in The Last Jedi was stepping out of Vader's shadow to become his own thing. And this was mostly symbolized in the destruction of his mask. Then suddenly, without any explanation, the mask is back again. It felt like a step back. And then his redemption ultimately was poorly executed as well. Don't get me wrong, the scene itself was amazing and probably one of the 3 moments in the film that actually emotionally moved me. But the build-up to it was flat. In Vader's arc, Empire has him slowly turning from his selfish dark side ways because he wants to rule with Luke and have his son beside him. Then Jedi takes that caring for his son further and uses it to stir conflict in Vader the entire film and make his redemption plausible. The whole film was Vader showing conflict within himself. Don't get me wrong, Kylo Ren had the same thing, but if he was to turn, it seems the throne room scene in The Last Jedi was the opportune time to do it. After that, it seems his character solidified on the dark side, and Rise of Skywalker seems to carry that on, and then Rey beats him and Leia dies trying to save Ren, and then suddenly he's redeemed. There was zero build-up, and if it was not for the attachment I had to the characters of Leia, Kylo Ren, and Han Solo, I would not have cared whatsoever. As it falls, his redemption came out of nowhere and had no real outcomes except for saving Rey. I think while it wasn't entirely character-destroying, the way they did it, his redemption slightly ruined his character and what made him so interesting. Then his body disappears, but he doesn't appear as a Force ghost, and it kind of ruins his whole redemption if he doesn't truly get redemption of living in the Force, or redemption of eternal Force afterlife that like everyone else got, like Anakin. But the scene itself was amazing, and the conflict he showed during his vision with Han Solo was so well done. So I'll give it that. So there's that going for it. But, I mean, overall, it's just, I thought it was poorly done. It was jarred and rushed and not built up. And also, by the way, I want to mention the kiss between Rey and Kylo Ren came out of nowhere and was kind of disgusting. I mean, they did have chemistry, but it was never really expounded on to take it to a romantic level, and this felt really forced and just popped out of nowhere, and then never addressed. Next up is the character of Leia. This one isn't entirely Abrams' fault, but some of the scenes Leia feels stiff and out of place. I understand he had little to work with, and I'm glad Leia was in the film, but the way they, in a sense, recreated Leia felt a little jarring for me. But how they ended her character story I thought was well done. However, there's one major issue I did have. That scene with Leia and Luke fighting back from the original trilogy era. Yeah, it was cool, and I thought it was a nice explanation for Leia and her Force powers and Jedi training situation. But then they show their faces, and the CGI recreation was a little bad and kind of unnecessary. People didn't like it when Rogue One did it, and they didn't like it now. The scene was already fine. We knew who the characters were. We knew which one was which, and I think revealing their faces was nothing more than an attempt to get fans on board and show off digital technology, which hasn't always worked well for Star Wars. Poe, I think, was well done. Kind of like that he was forced into the leadership role, and his grasp that he felt he wasn't really ready with Lando to cheer him on, I think that was also pretty cool. I also like when Snaps dies, which was a shocker, and Poe has a moment where he realizes that they've lost, and he apologizes to everyone for leading them to their deaths. That was a moment that kind of emotionally moved me a little bit, and it was awesome when Lando and Chewie at that moment came out with the fleet of ships. That was well done. Finn was okay, I guess. I mean, he didn't really have an arc for him, so he's just kind of standing there. He finished his arc in Force Awakens, and in The Last Jedi he kind of repeats it a little bit, so there's nothing really else for him to do. This just further embraces my thoughts that he should have died in Last Jedi, similar to Han Solo with Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back. Maz Kanata was just kind of there for no reason and did nothing, which was kind of dumb. I loved when Chewie realized Leia died, though. That actually made me cry. I thought it was a well-done moment and the most emotionally moving moment of the film. Lando was awesome, and thankfully his character was not killed or ruined. R2 was just kind of chucked aside. Dio was... I don't know, why did we have Dio? We have so many droids already, why are we adding in another one? C-3PO was alright, but I thought his whole death scene and fake-out could have been done a lot better. Luke is fine, not much else to say with him. Rose was pretty much sidelined, which I thought was dumb. Yeah, she wasn't written well in Episode 8, but she was still a main character, and to ignore that felt weird. Don't just ignore her, fix her, write her better. Hux being the spy was pretty cool, and I got some serious Callus vibes, but then his death scene was pathetic and quick, and kind of just a throwaway, like his character. At least he was competent this time, though. The final character I want to touch on is Anakin Skywalker, and how I think his character has been even further ruined. After the disgraceful treatment his character got from the prequels, he has finally been restored to justice by the Clone Wars and Rebels, only to be destroyed again. This movie destroys his final sacrifice by having Palpatine, who was killed, brought back, and Rey supposedly gives him the final blow, and his arc of destroying the Sith has been officially ruined. And now we're being told this is the final end of the Skywalker Saga, and he isn't involved in his own saga. A 5-second voice cameo doesn't really count. He should have been there with Luke on Ahch-To to give some wisdom to Rey, and there for an end for a Force Ghost cameo with his children. Well, I think 7 and 8 are mostly respectful of his character. 9, I think, just craps all over it. I also want to talk about the Force powers, too. I thought the Rey and Kylo connection was cool in Last Jedi, and I was glad this continued, but I think the Force teleporting matter was way over the top and so overused. Yes, I know it happened with the raindrop in The Last Jedi, but I think this was way overdone in the film, and how only happened at convenient moments. I thought them both force pulling a ship was ridiculous, and took me out of the movie, to be honest. This isn't exactly, I didn't want that. This is what I hoped Luke wouldn't do in Episode 8, and now they're doing it in Episode 9. The healing is, I also hated. I hated it in The Mandalorian, and I hated it here. The Serpent was one thing, healing Kylo Ren's mortal wound was too much. And Kylo Ren resurrecting Rey was dumb. Yeah, I know it happened in the Clone Wars with Ahsoka, but they were essentially Force gods who did it. It makes little sense, and I like it more than the other bizarre Force stuff. But I still didn't like it, and it was over the top. And also, I think Palpatine shooting Force lightning at all the Resistance ships was retarded. I hated it, and again, it took me out of the movie. It was so bizarre. I also thought the comedy was kind of flat. It was a lighter tone, so the comedy wasn't out of place like The Last Jedi, but some of the moments were cringy, like Poe arguing about BB-8 at the beginning of the film. A major point I wanted to discuss also was the retconning of The Last Jedi. Yes, I know it was a divisive movie and made some questionable decisions, some of which I liked and some which I didn't, but at the end of the day, those decisions were still made. Yes, it is okay to do something. A perfect example was Hux. Force Awakens, he was a serious villain. The Last Jedi made him a buffoon. To fix that in 9 was okay, but retconning Rey's parents, retconning Kylo Ren's character growth, sidelining Rose, making Luke's sacrifice irrelevant, I think it just takes you out of the movie. It would essentially be the same as taking Empire Strikes Back, then in Episode 6, Vader's super evil again, only to be redeemed in the middle of the film. Lando was heavily involved in 5, and then he's nowhere to be seen in 6. And Vader's revelation to Luke about his parentage being a lie. There's a difference between ignoring and retconning. Episode 7 and 8 ignored the prequels, but they didn't retcon them. And again, to retcon simple things is one thing, but major points of a film felt apologetic and pandering and takes you out of the movie. Don't get me wrong, I love 7 and 8. But now I'm wondering, what was the point of all this? Was there a point? This trilogy suffered from an overall lack of vision, and this film made it really apparent. Yeah, they weren't really planned out, but you didn't really feel that with the first 2 films. I still think the sequel trilogy is superior to the prequel trilogy, but at least they had an overall vision. The original trilogy didn't really have much of a vision, but at least Lucas made it clear he had a beginning, middle, and end as he went along. The film is really a mess. The first act is trying to pander to Star Wars fans and apologize for The Last Jedi in a sense, which it really shouldn't. Then the second act is the film's attempt to tell its own story that comes out of nowhere because there was no real setup in the prior 2 films. And the first act is too busy trying to appeal to nostalgic man-babies. Then the third act is trying to tie it all up, and so it has to copy Episode 6, including a celebration across the galaxy with Bespin and Endor and some weird-looking Ewoks, and the final battle, and the Emperor's defeat, and Kylo Ren's redemption, and the Jedi mentors as Force Ghosts. Except the ending was nowhere near as impactful as Return of the Jedi. It was so rushed. The pacing was generally fine, but the ending felt rushed and unsatisfying. It did not feel like an ending to 9 movies. It barely felt like an ending to the sequels. It is like Game of Thrones. I don't even feel like I watched the proper ending. I felt like I saw some fanboy who was mad about Episode 8 and then made his own headcanon into a movie and threw in every ship cameo and Force Ghost voice cameo and everything to try and make it look good. J.J. Abrams satisfied me with Episode 7. I thought it was the start of something solid. The Last Jedi did some questionable things, but at least it moved the story of the sequels along. This movie, in my opinion, was a setback for Star Wars. know a lot of people really liked it. I just wish I knew why. Because if you only like a movie for retconning its predecessor, well then, I don't know if the movie can actually stand for something. Retconning a movie half the base hated doesn't make this one good. Overall, I gave it a 6 out of 10. Yes, there were some fun moments overall, but the movie hurt more than they did. And on my ranking, I'm going to give it number 10. Attack of the Clones is the only live-action film I hate more than this. I think it was rushed, poorly made, and lacked actual story substance that other films have. Yeah, it has some fun scenes and some emotional moments. It has some good acting and some okay storytelling in sections. But this movie has a lot of flaws. It is the only Disney Star Wars movie that I genuinely did not enjoy. I wanted to. Believe me, I did. But I didn't. And I guess I'm not even disappointed. I didn't really have much expectations other than Anakin Force Ghost cameo, and even then, it still failed to deliver. JJ chose to make a fan film versus an actual satisfying conclusion to a 40-year saga, and this mess of a film shows, desperately. 58% on Rotten Tomatoes? I think that's very accurate. Thank you guys for joining in. Darth Momo out, and may the Force be with you. Always. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video, comment down below and hit that like button. Oh, and check out some of my other videos. I'm sure you'll find them in the light.